And possibly the second time it worked. I don't know. Because tonight, hello everybody, good night, good evening, good morning to all those time zones and those future times when you come back and watch it in catch up. Because I don't see anybody here. Not so much that you are not watching right now, which is totally fine, but also I'm gonna be on my own tonight. My awesome friend Synth-Tarists is having an awesome time on a convention about vintage computers. Computers, and he's having a very good time. In fact, I believe he might be even doing a live stream at the same time. So if you feel so inclined, since this might not be what you're looking for tonight, you might go to his channel and watch a lot of very awesome computer stuff and vintage stuff. On top of that, because circumstances and time and summer and I've done what I can. I cannot split myself and do more than one job at a time. And tonight I'm just gonna, like Mr. Puricelli says in Project Network, I'm gonna just be testiculating about the only subject I can do without any research, which is guitars. So if you had an excuse to leave the show right now because, oh my God, I don't want to deal with that, that's not what I came here for, I'm very sorry. But you know, this is the show where synths and guitars collide. So a little bit for everything. Last month, we did a show trying to explain guitar players. What's all that shenanigans about synthesizers, what synthesizers are all about, what are the components that make a synthesizer, and how you might find your way around and to handle them. And although on a very basic level, but just to kind of explain the nature of the beast. So, as I said, because I've been kind of busy with other projects, as in my band finally have a live gig, so I had to in fact, I have to dip in for the bass player, which we're in the transition of we're in between bass players, so I have to learn the whole set list from this bass player point of view and perform it myself. So I did have not much time to get the show ready or get something more interesting. Or probably this is exactly the show that you've been waiting for all these months, because this is the one you really are interested, because you have tons of synthesizers, you know about synthesizers, you know that synthesizers, how they work and how do you play them, but you're curious about guitar, and that's exactly the one that you need the more knowledge, because they're kind of trickery or magic or sorcery things that make possibly amazing sounds that you're interested in, or just because you just want to go in front of the stage and share the glory of the chosen ones, of those selected to rock hard. Okay, sorry, I'm gonna do this. Don't get sick, don't get sick. Don't... yeah, a little better. Yes, at least to my perception. So obviously this is gonna be slow because I'm on my own to do everything, but if you so feel inclined, please tag me or write down your questions, and as soon as internet makes them arrive to me, I will answer them. Be a little patient in case I'm on the middle of saying something, even when it might not be interesting. That's up to you. Because it might. I'm trying to keep my brain on all the spaces and all the aspects of doing this live stream. So, guitars, huh? Where should we start? I guess we should start from the beginning. What is a guitar? Well, guitar, it's a string instrument, a plucked string instrument, not a bowed. We don't have a bow like a violin, fiddle, cello, upright, viola, violoncello. It's mostly designed, or was designed mostly to be plucked with your fingers, with the hands, or as an alternative or a substitution, or depending on the school, the traditional school you're following, with a plectrum. What's a plectrum? Traditional used to be a little piece of tortoise shell, basically a tortoise or turtle. I think a turtle shell, scale of one of the shell, grind down and make it thin, more like, I don't know, I think this is 0.60 inches or 0.060 inches. And why? For what reason? Mostly for precision, and depending on other string instruments, for speed of playing, to be able to play faster. Not that back in the day, because plugged string instruments go back all the way to the Renaissance, almost to the 11th, 12th century. We start to see small devices, instruments, possibly derived from also from the violin, kind of, because it's got, the guitar itself is more based on the lute. What's the difference? The difference is the type of shell, the amount of strings, the length of the neck, which that's another subject we're going to talk about. Because if any, what I'm going to talk tonight, I would like it to be kind of a guide, as in, I got synths, but I want to play synth guitar. What guitar should I buy, or what is the guitar I want to buy? What are my choices, and how to decide which one to get? I will. It would be, that would be my goal if I manage to do so. So let's give it a try. So, as I said, very almost since the Renaissance, the European musicians have been looking for a way to have a portable string instrument, easy to play, most on the tradition or on the spirit of the lyre, the lyre, L-I-R-E, like in the Romans, that kind of U-shape bar with the strings in the middle that you just plug one at a time. That lyre evolved to mostly of the plug string instruments of nowadays, and also to the harp. Not Alan Arpelmont products, but that thing like Groucho Marx, that curtain of strings on a very big frame that you lay on yourself and play that harp. The harp has its resonant box because that's okay. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. So I'm gonna pull, just for example, to make an example and just play them parts. I'm gonna pull one specific type, mostly because it's the one I have on hand, of acoustic guitar, so I can start explaining what, when, and whys. Okay, let me pull this one. So, although this is very, very modern, as in 20th century design, materials, spirit, and almost sound as well, but it still keeps a big chunk of the specs that define a guitar. So first of all, we need a neck. The neck obviously is, I'm gonna hold it here. The neck is what holds the frets, basically anything from the top of the tuning pegs all the way until it joins the body, right? That would be what we call the neck, to the point that that space where you put the tuning pegs is called the head. So, all right, so that was easy. So what's the purpose of the head, tuning pegs, neck, and the parts in the neck? So the parts in the head is basically having the tuning keys, which is a mechanism for which, with a lever and a gear, sorry, this is in the way. That's a very useful tool as well, but not really relevant right now. So you have the peg that has a shaft, goes into a gear, and transforms this sideways turn motion into a coiling motion in the front. It's basically a way to be a little more comfortable. Otherwise, this piece should be behind. And in fact, many instruments, strict plucked instruments of the past, had the pegs behind. Not an exception, even modern flamenco guitars of specific builders, they still believe that the proper way to do it is with a through peg, tuning peg, that keeps the knob, in a way of speaking, the part you interact with your hand, keeps it in the back. So it would be just making this line, and you would turn this way. That's why I'm explaining, because you still can find those, mostly nylon strings and or banjos. Some banjos are still having a back-loaded gears instead of side-loaded gears, right? And what would be the purpose of all that mechanical technology? Basically, is to be able to, once you wrapped your string to it, it would allow you on very finite, very minute increments to stretch the material of the strings, whatever it is, if it's metal, if it's nylon, if it's brass, steel, whatever material the string is made of. The purpose of the peg is just to pull from it away from the other anchor point, which in this case would be the bridge. I don't know if you ever tried to play a rubber band. The more you stretch the rubber band, the higher the pitch it gets. So if it's just slightly stretched, it's gonna be more like a bass, dum dum dum. And if you stretch it almost to the breaking point, it's gonna be almost like a banjo, cling 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 cling. Right, that's easy. Thanks to the equal temperament, the Occidental equal temperament, we agreed to give a specific pitches to a specific notes. For instance, starting with the middle A on the keyboard, that is 440 hertz. A hertz is the amount of times a physical body vibrates per second, right? So 440 hertz means it's moving from his highest reach from side to side, or from top up and down, top to bottom. The full travel of the vibrating device that is creating the sound happens 440 times per second. Okay, but that is just one note. That would be the middle A in the keyboard, somewhere around here, right? What about the rest? Good. The second conventionalism that modern Western technology music has agreed is that every time you take the frequency of any note and you multiply by 2, you double it. That is what is called an octave. So it's double the frequency. The note gets the same name, note name, with an addition of a different octave name. So there's an A in the octave 0, there's an A in the octave 3, there's an A in the octave 8, and so on and so forth, and all the octaves in between. Once you've accommodated that doubling the frequency creates an octave, then you just need to create in between those two notes of the same name, you need to create 12 extra steps. So you take that double frequency. For instance, if we go from middle A to 1 octave up, that will be 440 to 880, right? So now you need to divide that difference, those 440 hertz difference, into 12. You divide it by 12, and that would be the distance for each note in between, in the octave, in the 12 steps that makes an octave, right? Sorry, in the 12 half steps that makes an octave. But obviously, if you want to know the third note in the octave, what is the actual frequency, you need to take your original frequency, take the separation in the octave for a half step, count how many half step of distance you have in between the first and the fifth, which is 7 half steps, and just add 7 times that half step amount. Or more likely, just divide the difference, the 440 hertz in between, divided by, divided by 12, and you sum as many as them as you need. That obviously, if you think about it, brings an uncomfortable amount of decimals, because the equation is not so, is not 1 plus 1 makes 2. Obviously, human hearing is very, very sensitive, but it's also finite and is happy to get confused. As in, we don't really care once we go below a tenth or a hundredth of a hertz. We don't really care if it's precisely what it should be or is ballpark where it should be. That's why at to one point you still can tune instruments. If you're trained on what the final pitch should be, you still can tune instruments by ear, as in listening to the frequency, comparing your head, or even comparing the sound that they make together until you, by training, decide that it's in the right spot. If we would be able to apply a frequency measuring computer to those frequencies and measure both, we would find probably that there is a discrepancy. They're not bang on in the same 7th decimal, but we don't care. We like it anyway, and that's plenty enough for music. It has been plenty enough for the past millennia, so why to change it now? Good. So that would be the purpose of the tuner, to assign the startup pitch of the string by just tension, adding tension, pulling the material. Another factor of the pitch of the string is what is called the scale, which I'm gonna just refer very briefly now and explain a little deeper later. What we call scale on a fretted neck instrument is the distance between this little in this case plastic, traditionally bone, but this one is plastic, a specific type of plastic, but plastic nevertheless, between it's basically the length of string in between this plastic bit all the way through the instrument until this other plastic bit down here, right? This one is called the saddle, okay? The saddle sits inside the bridge, right? That's the area where you usually, depending on the design and type of design of your instrument, where you usually are going to, okay, let me make a little more space for this. Let me check, because I assume, yeah, nothing has changed. So, but nevertheless, it's not that pretty and it's taking space away from the screen. So that distance between this piece of plastic and this piece of plastic is what we call scale of a stringed instrument. How many inches, centimeters, millimeters? That would help on many factors, but also will determine, dictate the pitch of the string. Also, to help on reaching a specific pitch, we build the strings on different gauges. The section of the string, you can barely see in the image, goes from thick to thinner, 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 thinnest. By putting less material, we allow the material to be lighter. Therefore, with the same amount of energy, it will be able to vibrate faster. Means that the thinner the string, the higher the pitch we can create with that string. To the point that that's more or less how you tune a guitar. The thicker string, which in this case in the image is the highest on the plane of the neck is gonna be the one creating the lower tone, lower as in bass, right? And the thinner the string on the same plane, I'm gonna try not to confuse because now we're gonna get on the second side of reverse everything that guitar has, and you need to get any string instruments in general has, and you need to get your head around it. The thinner string, right, on the same plane, which would be the one on the bottom of the plane of the neck, is the one producing the highest pitch, as in treble. Through convention, those two strings should be tuned to the same note, but 2 octaves apart. This is a very low E, and this is a very high E, right? So, pitch, the final pitch of the note we're going to generate comes from the scale, the gauge, as in the width of the actual piece of wire, metal, nylon, whatever you're using to create that instrument. Sorry. But also, because if it was only for those aspects, you would only have, in the case of the modern guitar, only 6 notes to play. Sorry, from bottom to top. And yes, this guitar is out of tune. That's another sour lesson that you need to learn with guitar. You're going to spend almost the same amount of time keeping the instrument in tune as you're going to spend playing the instrument. It's a trade-off, I'm afraid. So, but we want more notes than just 6. Although you can do a big bunch if your creativity is good enough by all the types of rules of harmony and rhythm. You can do a big bunch with 6 notes, with 2 octave separation. But let's get greedy. We want more. How do we get more? On every string instrument, the pitch, once we establish an initial scale and we establish an initial width that gives an initial pitch, the final pitch that we're going to be able to execute relays on the length of the string. So, by making the vibrating part of the string shorter, like the experiment some of us did in school, you take one of those flexible-ish rulers, you put it on the edge of your table, you whack it, and it goes to. You put most of the ruler or less of the ruler floating over the edge, do it again, and you get a pitch variation just by shortening the amount of ruler that is vibrating on the table. By the same laws of physics, by shortening the vibrating side of the string, you get higher pitches than you started with. As in, if this is the full string, I'm not even touching it, and suddenly I make the string from my finger to the bridge, which is the vibrating side, by fretting down, I suddenly make the note higher. And that's all it takes in guitar. That is all about. That's what the whole instrument is about. Is about making the strings shorter on a specific pattern, on a specific pitch, with a specific combination of them to make them musical. The same way that we define the Western equal temperament tuning system divided in 12 equal half steps, guitar is divided in half steps, right? Although a scale it's a diatonic scale is a combination of full steps and half steps on a specific pattern. The chromatic scale, which basically means every single note possible to play that we recognize, and we agree that those are the only ones. Western culture, if you go to Eastern cultures, they go beyond 12, but that's a completely different story for a completely other show. So we divide the octave, which is the repetition of the same note, because you're doubling the frequency. Or if you want to go lower, going bassier, you're halving. So if you start in 440 and start going lower, when you get to 220, that is again the same note name. So A440 is the note A. 220 is also a A note. It's just a different octave, right? I believe A440 is in octave 4, and A220 would be in octave 3, one octave lower. So that's how you name it and how you find your whereabouts on where are you pitch-wise. Although harmony-wise and melody-wise might make no difference whatsoever, pitch-wise makes a big deal for difference, which octave you use it. All this, we make it a big deal. So, guitar is divided still in the 12 half step that the chromatic scale of the diatonic system on equal temperament is based on. How so? How do we do that? And how do we do it consistent enough and repeatable? That's what these little pieces of metal are for, right? They're called frets, and they're nailed. These metallic ones are actually nailed to this piece of wood called the fretboard, right? It's kind of good to try and keep up with the lingo, because some teachers and some theoreticians or theorizers or masters of guitar like to drink from different sources, and they might become confusing if you're not sure about your own baselines and your own theory, and to interpret what that person actually is meaning. Not because he's wrong or because he's talking about a completely different subject. No, it's because music and guitar, being a popular instrument, has been drinking from many schools, starting with the Spanish school that was mostly taught by the, I want to say, equal parts Italian school and Moor school and Arab school. Lute and variants of the lute came through Africa to Spain, and they inspired or they pushed the evolution to the Spanish guitar. But also all the instruments made their way through France, Italy, Germany, Switzerland, and all the countries in mainland Europe. And they also started their own tradition and their own theory. Mostly their own lingo to call the same things. They're just different names for the same aspect. For instance, the fact that talking to you, I'm using, I think is the German or the evolution of the Saxon standard that names the notes from A to G, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, right? When the Latin or at least the Spanish school, in a way of speaking, or academia, is more prone to use the Latin origin, which evolved into do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, si, and do, which for stars has a main difference. the main and starting point of the Saxon system is the note A. In the Latin is La, which technically, according to some harmony schools, is the sixth note of the actual system, because the original scale, the original Greek mode, started in Do, which used to be Ut, and in the Saxon system is C, the letter C, which is not the first letter in the alphabet, at least not in the modern English alphabet. It's not the first one, right? So in a way, the Saxon system starts in the sixth note when the Latin system starts in the first note. But obviously, what the fuck do I know? I was taught by the Latin system. So that's why I talk this way. Not because any of them is better. Although, for classic musicians, I think they lay more on the side of the Latin system than the Saxon system. They do C to B, the 12 half steps, instead of A to G, the 12 half steps. Why am I saying 12 half steps? Because that's all the standard possible pitches you can handle before repeating notes, names. But hey, wait a second, you're talking about 7 letters, right? In both cases, 7 names. Where are the rest? The rest is what we call altered notes or modified notes, because to my understanding, they were created afterwards. So we first created the diatonic scale with steps and half steps, and then, and by we I mean humanity, and then we decided to give name at the gaps in between the full steps, because we already have had most of the names for the half steps. But what about the distance, the space in between? And since we agreed that octaves are going to split in 12, which once again is a fairly modern agreement. It's not been there since ever. I think it's something about 1700s, 16 or 1700s. So basically 15th or 16th century, that we agreed to divide the octave in 12. Hence the 12 half steps and the extra names for the extra notes that they appeared. Because before that, it was all about 8. Basically 7 different notes, and the 8th was a repetition of the first. Or you go down the first, 7th, the 8th lower repetition of the first. So how to achieve that on a plug string instrument like the guitar? As I said, by the frets, through the system of the frets, which divide the string in pitch-wise equidistant intervals of frequency. Why am I pointing this out? Because if you look at it, the centimeters, the millimeters in between the metal bars are not equal. All right? They're proportional, but they're not equal. Why they're not equal? Because once again, we're splitting, we're dividing, right? So first of all, first division we do on the string is what would be the center. So if we look at the whole scale from neck to bridge, the first division we want to find out is the middle, which is this metal piece here, right? So, funny enough, if I press my finger there, I'll explain why I'll do it this way. split the guitar in two, as in the remaining vibrating string is half, and by making the string half the distance, we double the frequency. This is the frequency, this is twice the frequency. Once again, we found the octave. But funny enough, if I split it the other way around, I put my finger on the other side is gonna be quieter because it doesn't have the amplification system, but the other side should have the same pitch. All right, so this side has the same pitch as this side because it's half of the string. It's divided in two perfect halves. Okay, so from then on, and because we want to be interacting with this side of the string, not the next side of the string, because volume, because that's the side we design to be amplified. Once we found out the octave, as in lowest pitch, double the pitch, if I divide this length again in half, it would find another octave. Sadly, that would mean 3, 5, 7, 8, that I need to go more or less here to find against the half of the string, and whatever is left. First of all, I don't have frets that deep inside the guitar, not in this design of guitar. And second, it's not enough mass on the string to be loud enough to compete with the other ones. That's why we dismiss it. But it would happen again. As many times as I have the distance, as many times I will double the frequency. The rest of the frequencies you created by splitting them. For instance, once you found the octave, or you got the octave, and you find your octave, your half of the half, which I believe is here. It's either here or here. Yeah, I think it's this one. This is what we call a third higher than the bottom octave. That's a third. That's 3 notes above. That's 5 half steps. 5 out of 12. And again, you keep splitting and you keep finding all these precise-ish locations for the frets between the metal part and the bridge to create a specific length of string that will give us a note, a pitch frequency that we have assigned to a specific musical note. So we got that. We got the frets. We got the neck. Let's keep going with the body. So that's why you got all this metal stuff. Also, because of the scale, these original 6 notes that you can do with just one hand have been perfected through the centuries, kind of, because Spanish guitar is barely 2 centuries old, 2.5-ish, although similar instruments that had similar applications are a little older than that, up to 5 centuries, roughly. But what we understand as Spanish guitar, as in 6 strings on this particular tuning with a big enough or deep enough resonant box, with a bridge, with tuning pegs, this type of tuning pegs, etc., what we now recognize visually as a guitar, it's fairly young, century and a half, if any. So it has, the tuning has been through the centuries prior to that being perfected, to the point to decide, that Spanish guitar is made out of 6 strings with only one, in this case, wire. Before, in order to have to create volume, they will use multiple strings. How to say it? They will use more than one wire per string, per pliable line of material that you're going to interact with. For instance, a mandolin. A mandolin is a double-stringed instrument. Each one of the 4 playable, playable lines of material on the fretboard has 2 strings. American Western 12-string guitar is a variation on the Spanish guitar, 6 strings, similar interval tuning between the strings, but instead of single strings, the double strings. Although they're not tuned to the same note, but they're tuned on a specific pattern, right? They're not unisons, what you call unison, when you have 2 times the same pitch, the same note playing, but you have different pitches. Although it's the same note name, but they're in different octaves, for instance. 12 string is basically all the bottom or the low 4 strings, this one, this one, this one, and this one, and this one. All these above my finger, all those 4 strings above my finger are 2 strings with an octave separation. So one is 1 octave lower than the other. And the final 2 strings, the higher treble strings, they're just double, they're unisons. So you got 2 strings playing the same pitch. With that, you get an interesting phasing effect, because no matter how good is your technique, they're never gonna vibrate in full synchronicity. They're always gonna desynchronize a little bit, gonna be chasing each other. And that, in physical terms, we know sine waves. If you manage to sync 2 perfect sound waves up on top of each other, they just sound a little louder, but they don't sound any fatter or any wider or any interesting. But if you detune one of them, or you apply modulation to one of them, then suddenly they become more interesting, more complex, more appealing. That is the purpose of the American Western 12-string guitar, is to become like 2 guitars playing at the same time, kind of. So, headstock, neck, frets, and subdivisions. And as I said, 12 half steps. So you get the one where the scale starts, which is the nut, called the nut. Either, if it has a 0 fret, would be one of these bars right close to it for, I don't know, traditional purposes. It has a different timbre, a slightly different timbre, and it's just a different school of manufacturing. Nowadays, mass production manufacturers have decided that it's not required. It takes more effort than improvement the outcome of applying it gives you. So they just put both parts. The nut, which solely mission is to keep the strings apart from each other on a specific placement, sideways, as in sideways. That's the function of the nut. When given height, as in how high above the fretboard, and dictating the actual scale length, as in the touching point of the string with the last surface, would determine the starting point of the scale. That would be the purpose of the 0 fret. Why would they do that? Because you have metal, usually silver nickel alloy metal parts, and suddenly this one is either bone or plastic, which is not as dense, so it's not as bright as the metal. The discussion is endless, is being eternal. Some people obviously can hear the difference. Some people couldn't care less. As in, yes, there is a difference, but in the heat of the battle, I don't give a monkey's ass. So that's why industry has moved on and melted both functions, the dictating of the scale length, as in the last touching point, and the separation, the spread of the strings into one single piece, usually made out of a resin, plastic, or bone simil, or substitutive. Cool. And then we have the separations of all the half steps. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12, which we read, it's my octave. So you start all over again. So this 12th fret technically is your 0 fret again, if you had a 0 fret, right? So the note, as we already established, the note that you get on the 0, on the 12, is the same note, just 1 octave higher, is higher pitch, right? So in this particular case, in this string, in this bottom string, is an E, so this is a higher E. And from then on, this first fret, we number the frets not kind of by the space, because we're going to be, the fingering needs to happen before the fret to allow this amount of string from the fret to the bridge to vibrate freely. So what you do to fret properly is you push the string down towards the fretboard until it's touching the metal with enough force so you don't get, I'm going to try to do it wrong, which is hard for me, so you don't get buzzing sounds, and you don't pull the note out of pitch, which is highly possible on every fretted instrument. As in, if this is the pitch I'm looking for, if I press too hard, I can actually do vibrato just by pressing harder. So you need to, that's one of the ways to master the guitar, is learning how hard to press. So you get as close to the pitch, the intended pitch, as possible without being flat or sharp. Good. Going down. So once we establish a scale, division, notes, octaves, then you need a means to make that note, that music, that sound, that pitch audible. Make it loud enough so, first of all, you yourself, but more intentionally, anybody around you, because although it's extremely fun to play for oneself, the final purpose of playing guitar is to play for somebody else. Being your partner, being an audience, being Glastonbury main stage. So you need a means of amplification. Depending on what type of music you want to play, what style, what timbre you're looking after. But at the end, mostly about how many people you need to reach is when the type of guitar is gonna become decisive, is gonna be crucial, is gonna make it or break it. Acoustic instruments have a short to medium reach, which guitar building technology has been fighting for centuries. The closest or the farthest they manage to do is by the physical fact that the deeper the body, and by deep I mean the distance between what we call the top, which I'll explain what is function, and the bottom, the back side, the side that you actually are touching on your belly, chest, or wherever you want to place it. That distance times the amount of cubic liters of air that it would fit on that empty box, it's gonna help you increase the reach of the sound. Kind of one of those situations of the bigger the better. Up to a point. Because sadly, physics and human limitations say, okay, enough. Also, frequency helps, as in the higher the frequency, the smaller the body you can have. But since guitar has been agreed and standardized for a specific range of notes and pitches, you don't really have an option. Although tons of guitar players, they like to not abide by the rules, by the standards, and try to find their own. So they will try to pitch the whole guitar up, or thanks to electronic amplification, pitch the guitar down. That's a whole nother story for a whole nother day. So, and that's the reason why we have, in the case of an acoustic guitar, we have a empty, hollow piece of box to make the vibration of the string, the movement of the string when vibrating, transmit as tight as possible to the bridge, which is attached, clamped to the top, which is, although reinforced, is mostly a very fine, very thin layer of wood clamped to the rim of the box, very much like it would a speaker. So basically, the vibration of the string is making the bridge vibrate, making the whole top vibrate. And that vibration is creating compression of air, like we discussed in previous shows, a compression of air that we understand as sound, as pitch, as music, right? And that's how an acoustic works. So although we put holes into the box so we can hear it better, the holes are more important for the player than actually for the audience, because it's not the size of the hole that is going to make it louder, nicer, or harsher. But if you go beyond physics and acoustics, you go to electronics, the placement of the hole, which is kind of a porting of the sound, like a speaker would have a bass port, would interact with the strings. So the vibration of the strings would, even in this case, you can see it comes with an electronic system to help on the amplification side to become electronically amplified. So the string vibration of the string, we create a vibration on the saddle that compresses a quartz element that creates a voltage. Hey, control voltage. Voltage variation, not as an alternate, an AC voltage variation that then can be outputted to an electronic system of amplification, PA system, guitar amplifier, the list is endless. Problem is, those system of amplifications have enough drive, enough thrust, enough pushing power to vibrate the sound around the guitar, and also making the air around the guitar push on the top as well, and on the bridge as well, and on the pickup as well. So if we find the fine spot where that happens, is when we have a feedback, is when the guitar goes beep or because the one vibration is being multiplied so many times that is making the electronics create acoustics that influence the physics, that then at the same time create more electronics, and the cycle doesn't get broken. That's a feedback. It feeds back the whole system, right? So big boxes are easier. Big boxes with thin tops are easier to feedback. So for loud environments, not really likely. The compression, the porting, the hole, the sound hole, we call it, although the sound that does not really come from the hole. As we said, it comes from the whole vibration of the boot, like a membrane. The placement of the hole would deter the feedback from happening, hence that this particular designer decided to move the hole from the traditional bottom of the fretboard underneath the strings to as far away from the strings as possible, so that flow of air is not in the physical path of the vibration of the strings, right? To try to not totally prevent it, because you still can feedback this guitar, but to make it harder, right? To give you a better chance, a very fighting chance to fight feedback. But obviously, feedback is something we don't want, and feedback is something we've been fighting for the past 80 to 90 years, almost a century, a little less than a century, since the 1920s, basically. Because that's when we started applying amplifications, electronic amplification systems, to the guitar, to the Spanish guitar, Hawaiian guitar, lap steel guitar, all types of guitar, acoustic guitar, all types of guitar, because we wanted to reach bigger and bigger crowds. So we needed louder and louder guitars, beyond what the physics can do. And that's why we went for what it's been the best compromise we've found so far, which is basically removing the gap. Forget about depth, forget about air inside, forget about holes and air moving inside. Forget about that. Let's make the body 100% solid wood. Or, because somebody's gonna complain, oh, but you have semi-hollows. Yes, for specific applications, you can go halfsies. You can have a little bit of this world and a little bit of the other world. You can be very loud and almost prone to feedback, but you can have a little timbre of the hollow box, which we like. That's why middle grounds exist. Sadly, I don't have any of those middle grounds. I haven't managed to buy any of them yet. Probably someday, I don't know when. But I can go to the other extreme and go solid body. So let me catch the next example. This is how brain fried I am. I do have a semi-hollow guitar that I'm going to show right away. I totally forgot to have it. Duh. And here we have it. In fact, not for the minute. All viewers of this show have seen this one before, mostly because it's the one I bought specifically to apply the divided hexaphonic pickup, which is required for most of the synth guitar applications, uh, not invented, mostly developed, and very recently uh, put to rest for good, apparently, by Roland Corporation, which is this little baby here. This is the control box, and following the cable, this black bar here. Ooh, there, that's the one. That would be the magnetic divided pickup that sends analog magnetic voltage down to the synthesizer, to the voltage conversion unit and synthesizer, that then will become the Synth-Tar. But that's not why I'm showing it right now. I'm showing it because this is an example of how to put it. This is an example of what a middle ground, not solid but not hollow, would look like. Okay, you can see this gaps in electronics, but you can also see that you can see solid block of wood right underneath the bridge. It's painted in black. If not, you could see a big amount of wood. Basically, the way this is built, opposite to the other one, instead of being everything hollow and then a block of wood under the bridge, because steel strings have a little bit more pull. They have a little extra tension than nylon strings would have, almost the same as bronze or acoustic guitar strings would have, kind of depending on gauge, which are plenty to choose from. But this one in particular, no, because it's more like a lookalike than an actual device. The actual acoustic choice is basically everything is solid except for this little two hollow gaps. Nope. Basically this area and this area. I'm trying to cover the area. And this area underneath my hand, those are hollow. Nothing else. Everything else is solid, right? There's a solid core in the middle, all the way up to the what we call the bottom, where the guitar strap lays. There's a big chunk of wood on even around the hollow area, and the horns, these little thingy bits we call horns, are totally solid. So it's not actually using any acoustic qualities. It's just, some people call them just lighter electric guitars because they're removing mass out of it. Because the acoustic characteristics of it, once you get in the heat of the battle on big volume, high gain, if you can hear it, more power to you. I can't. Right. Also bought it because price. Thankfully nowadays we have machine-made guitars. We don't need luthiers to build them. And they do little beauties like this. They look beautiful for less than a tenth of the price that an instrument of this look would have costed just 10 years ago or 30 years ago. That's why I bought this one. So I said, since I have to install all these extra electronics, including the fact that I wanted to install the MIDI pickup by screwing the pickup to the wood, to the solid part of the wood, because of construction and a couple of things I'm going to pinpoint and explain in a minute. I said, okay, let's not expend a mortgage amount of money And let's just get something nice, playable enough, as in neck is straight enough, frets are fairly decent, leveled, and it's not an atrocity. It's not impossible to play. And since I'm mostly gonna be using the sounds that this pickup creates, the quality of this electronic system is secondary. It's good to have it, but it's not a deal breaker. So, apart from the fact that although this guitar is kind of deep for an electric, it's almost a third deeper than a usual electric is, or a fourth deeper. It's kind of on the range of traditional electric thin body guitars, right? So we don't really have a big box of empty air to create the sound. We still have our 6 pegs in this particular case, what we call 3 aside. Means that you have 3 strings on one side of the headstock, 3 strings on the other side. 3 aside. Hard. That was a hard one, right? No. So, come on. One of these days I'm gonna learn where my camera is. So, we're still counting on a spacer and scale defining piece of plastic, a little thicker, if any, but a little plastic, similar to any guitar using, similar to the acoustic, and any guitar using steel strings, although the neck, headstock, and fretboard unit is still made out of wood, of an undisclosed procedence, because quality hardwoods are expensive, and the first way to make an instrument cheaper is don't use the expensive ones, use cheaper woods. So they tend to play around with made up names or siblings of the woods you technically or theoretically want for tone or performance or comfort, with things that feel very, 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 very close, right? So that's another sour truth about guitars. The prices grow exponentially while the quality grows linearly. So the biggest example of diminishing returns, basically, once you pass the 1,000 pounds threshold, you need to almost duplicate the price of the unit in order to get 50 or 40% extra quality. And when we talk quality in guitars, sadly, we don't talk all the time on the quality that you can hear. It's mostly quality that you can touch. And within that quality that you can touch, as in how hard for your hands, how much effort your hands are gonna need to apply in order to get the performance you need out of the instrument. But nowadays, in modern mass production, it's more about for how many years that guitar is gonna be nice to play. Quality of the woods, quality of the finishes, quality of the hardware, how long the hardware is gonna last under intense use situation, and many corners cut in many levels, many. As in, I could make a whole thesis about cutting corners on guitar manufacturing just with this guitar. It's a whole education, this particular guitar, on how things should not be done. But for my application, it's good enough. We're not talking problem is getting the same guitar awesome that will last me a lifetime, or even my grandchildren would inherit. I have to multiply times 1,000 the price of the guitar to get that quality. So I'm fine, I'm good. I'm peachy, no problems, right? Plus, this is not my main guitar. This is my synth guitar. Cool. So as I was trying to say, sorry, I digressed. Like many other steel string instrument, although the neck, headstock, and fretboard is steel wood, you can see a little indentation here, like a little dip. That is the access for a kind of a tunnel that is being perforated in between. Get there, let me get there. In between what we actually call the neck, which would be the brown part, and what we call the fretboard, which would be the black part. You see that black line, that very thin black strip on top of it, that would be the fretboard. So sandwich in between the fretboard and the neck inside, there's a tunnel that is holding a steel truss rod, a rod of steel with a nut on this access point and an anchor point roughly where the neck ends. Depends on design and manufacturer, the position varies. And once again, according to design manufacturer, you can even have a upside down truss rod. You can have the anchor point on the heel, on the neck. This little protuberance is what you would call the heel of the headstock, when this protuberance is the heel of the neck, the one that attaches to the body, right? You could have the anchor point up here and the adjusting nut down here. I don't have any of those. I have bass guitars that have the truss rod on that disposition with the anchor point on top, but the adjustment on the bottom. Potato is which one is best, which one is worse. They both have flaws, both have advantages. Some people say that the ones adjusting on the top tend to compensate the neck on a flat and then upwards fashion, and the ones adjusting on the bottom tend to compensate the neck on a angle back or angle up fashion instead of getting a nice curve. If you're set up properly your guitar, you should not be able to tell the difference if your guitar is properly set. It's when you go beyond what is a standard or expected as a standard that you start favoring one or the other. But you need one. If you're going to be using steel core strings, you're going to be using a truss rod, because even the hardest boots, although they're enough to hold the tension of a standard tuning 6 strings, they're gonna move, and by move I mean bow or become concave when it interacts with weather, moisture, heat, dry heat, humid heat, cold, freezing temperatures, trying to play in the middle of January, a Christmas party by the side of a pool in the middle of Canada. That's not gonna sit well with the boot. The boot is gonna move. It's gonna set away the setup you put, as in relief and what we call action, which is the height, the distance between your string and your fret. I'm not gonna be able to. So you see that gap in between the line of metal and the bar of metal, it's not uniform. It gets smaller and smaller and smaller the higher you go, the higher you go on the neck. But also the fact that you move away from the anchor points makes the string more flexible. So it's a whole balancing game. How close you can put the strings without buzzing, without making bad noises, but not far enough so it becomes painful to play at the speed that you need to play. Because obviously you can get away with a very high action if you play in single line melodic pop or nursery rhymes. Dan dan ding dan ding dan da dan da ding dan dan. You can get away with murder for that. Now try to play heavy metal, speed metal, jazz. You either gonna make an injury in your tendons if your strings are too high, or most of your notes are gonna garble if you are too low. So it becomes more critical. That's why the whole point, that's why so many types, designs, variety, setups, string gauges, because no two guitar players have the same hands, tendons, muscles, and dexterity. That's why the variety. Plus, another big factor to choose a guitar, although it's almost impossible to show it in the camera, the curve that the section of the back of the head of the neck makes, if it's a perfect C, or if it's more like a V, or if it's what they call a D, which is very soft shoulders, very soft shoulders, but there is a little flatter, and then again a short shoulder. That's what we call a D. Because that's the part that your hand is going to be touching every single second of you playing, and you're meant to play at least 2 to 3 hours a day, it becomes OCD level crucial, because the pads on your fingers, the flesh on your fingers, where there's no two people with the same amount of flesh, with the same amount of fat underneath the skin, with the same amount of pad. So what your hand cannot cushion, you need to compensate with a soft touch. Also, the type of music you play, if you're making a lot of techniques with your fingertips, or all you do is chords. Once again, out of tune, right? It's gonna require a different ergonomy from the piece of wood you're gonna be playing for hours. That's why so much variety, to the point that it gets any non-guitar player that has never had to study or learn 60 songs in a week, as in having to practice 8 hours daily, would not understand why so much variety and why so many gauges and why we spend half of our lives setting and resetting the instrument. As in setup, playing around with the truss rod, playing around with the curvature of the neck, all relief, playing around with the height of the frets. As in the metal piece, the fret itself, the distance between the wood and the tip of the heel, what we call the crown, that also changes. You can buy taller frets, you can buy shallower frets, you can buy wider frets, you can buy narrower frets, as in, you see, it makes like 3 lines, one on the left, one on the right of the fret, and one in the middle, the crown. So the distance between left and right can be changed. The distance between bottom and the tip of the crown can be changed in many combinations. And that's why you go to a guitar center and you find 300 guitars hanged on the wall, because they all play with combinations of those factors. Not to mention that also, although the width is mostly standardized, sadly it's standardized in 2 or 3 measurements. Also the scale. We talked about scale, length between nut and bridge. In solid-bodied electric guitars, it's also standardized in 3 different measurements. Long story short, you got the Fender measurements. I think it's 25 and a half inches, 649 millimeters. You have the Gibson, not because they invented it, it's because they are the brands that did it first, did it for longer, and did it best, to the point that they're almost attached. Gibson guitars are meant to be, I think it's 23 and 3/4 inches. It's almost an inch and a half less. I think it's 630 millimeters, sort of. And the guitar, the scale length that this guitar is trying to replicate, Behringer style, is trying to look like, it's called Paul Reed Smith. It's one of the latest standards, one of the latest manufacturers and designers of guitars who decided Fender is too long, Gibson is too short, I'm gonna do one in the middle. So he started doing 24 inches instead of 25 inches. Instead of 25 and 3/4, just 25. So it's meant to be a sweet spot in between two. It's not too long, it's not too short, because the longer the string, as we agreed, the longer the string, to give it the pitch it's meant to have for the specific gauge you choose, the higher the tension. Explaining. If a Gibson guitar, the bottom string is a E3, I believe, note E, octave 3. It's an E3. It's meant to be, is agreed to be an E3. And with the gauge, let's call it 0.042 inches, which is another kind of a standard. So if you use the same gauge, 0.042, on a Fender with 24 and 3/4, or 20, I think it's 24 and 3/4, sorry. I'm getting those. Yeah, please call me off, because I need to check it. I always get the inches wrong. It's 649 millimeters. The force that your finger needs to do to press all the notes through the whole neck will be bigger than on a Gibson scale, 630 millimeters, I think, with the same 0.042 gauge string to the same E3, note E, octave 3 pitch. The resistance to pressing is going to be smaller, so it's softer and in a way faster or harder depending on the player, but you can measure the amount of newtons you need to make the movement of away from the fret, close to the fret. This movement, it's all about this movement, right? You would say, but oh my god, but you're talking millimeters there, you're talking thousandth of an inch that you need to move. Why is that so crucial? Well, it's crucial because you're going to be doing it probably a couple thousand times per song, up to 60 songs per night if you're a professional. Let's call it 5 nights a week. Those thousands of an inch become miles because of exhaustion, because of tendinitis, because of age, because of I need to do a lot of it, as in a lot of it. Same way that you would find changing a non-weighted keyboard, synth action, to a piano keyboard. Are you going to be playing Rick Wakeman lead solos on a hammer piano action 5 nights a week, one solo per song, 25 songs per night? I don't think so. And if you do, you're probably growing a very big case of either carpal tunnel or tendinitis, because it's an abusive amount of repetitive stress. So that's why those type of factors count, but also count since the resistance of the string to movement is greater. There's one of the techniques that is very loved and liked and looked for on guitar is called bending. You're taking one note, you're plucking the note, and you bend the string out of pitch until a different pitch. The amount of tension my finger is holding right now is no joke. Even more considering that this is a extra heavy set of strings. Why would I do that? That's for another episode. But it's not fun. Let's see if you can see. That's the groove I did just by doing that once. Think about doing it 70 times per song, 20 songs per night, 5 nights a week. Not fun. Okay? So that's why you have so many options. Strings, height, ref, scale. Obviously, anybody would say after what I explained so far is, oh, but then get up instead of 649 or 630, get a 600 millimeter scale. Get it even smaller. That way, the tension is gonna be nothing. You're gonna be able to do whatever you want endlessly. Yeah, the problem is humans have fingers, and fingers comes in different sizes. And sorry, not that one. And the distance in between metal bars, the frets, is proportional to the scale. If you make your scale shorter, in fact, I'm going to show you an example. If you make your scale shorter, the gaps also become smaller. Means that it's harder. You need to be even more precise to put the finger in the right gap at the right time. Everything is a trade-off on guitar. If you go too far in one spec, all the sides of your playing are gonna suffer. Let me show you. Let me illustrate the scale difference. I'm gonna get the other one. So this one here is different in several aspects. First of all, is what we call a neck through body construction, because from headstock to a strap, the whole length of the guitar is made out of a sandwich, in this case out of that's 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 pieces of wood. 9 long enough pieces of wood sandwiched and then shaved down, cut down to make the contours of the neck. The heel is softer, and the body. Then 2 more pieces of wood are just glued to the sides, and that's what is going to make the body, your cavities, your bridge anchoring your pick-and positions, and your horns, your pointy bits, right? So that's one thing that's different. The previous one is what is called set neck. The attachment of the neck and the part of the body is by gluing the neck to the body. So it needs to be set by glue, obviously clamped, and let cure however long it needs in order to become one piece that then you can work, paint, and finish and get a guitar. Uh, Technically, this system is harder and takes longer because there's more gluing you have to do. First, you have to glue the core bar, then you have to glue the sides, and then you have to the whole of it cut. So the person doing the cutting, the finishing, the polishing, the contouring needs to be way more trained, more specialized, more precise worker than the other system that somebody does the neck, somebody does the body, and a third person just glues them together, right? So it requires more people, but they don't need to be that much specialized or that much expert on their skill. They're easy to train in a way. But the bigger difference we're talking here is we're talking scale, which is, once again, the distance between the plastic piece that is spreading the strings and holding the height of the strings and the beginning of the scale, or the nut on the neck, to the bridge, which in this case is another difference. This is a what you call a tailpiece, and then the actual bridge that is making the strings. Let me see if I can find a good shot. It's making the strings high enough so it clears the frets, the pickups, everything it needs to clear, and also is given the similar curve that the fretboard and the frets also have. Can you still hear me? I don't know. Oh, sorry for the banging. So it's a different type of bridge. Tradition, manufacturing options, cutting corners on mass production. They give a little a 2% different timbre. Nothing really that you need to lose your sleep for. Just try the guitar. If you like how it sounds, buy it no matter which type of bridge it's using, except for tremolo units. And by the way, guitar players call tremolo, which is actually vibrato. Okay, we call them tremolo. Tradition, marketing, and ignorance, basically. So, but the distinguishing factor that I want to pinpoint here is the scale. The length between bridge and nut. And here is when it gets really, really tricky. Okay. Yeah, I'm gonna need to go away, so you're not gonna be able to listen to hear me. I'm gonna try to align nuts. But when the nuts, you almost can see, excuse the imprecision, but roughly at the same point. The bridges are not, by very little, I have to admit, but they're not. Would say was a bigger difference. Oh, wait a second, no, there's a bigger difference. No, there's not such a bigger difference. It's almost a centimeter difference. Okay, this is what I said we're gonna call from now on Gibson scale. It's kind of the shorter adult guitar, because you can get shorter scale guitars which are addressed for children, mostly because the frets become so small that adults find a hard time to play them. I put them side by side. No, you won't see them. If I put them side by side. Ooh. No, I don't have a camera long enough to see them both. So in this, because this one is meant to be just slightly longer than this one, there's not much. Basically, we're talking this much of a difference between the scale lengths. And I'm going to try and show you a Fender length, which is the longest, kind of a standard longest. Although, once again, every time you say the word standard on the guitar world, you get proven wrong almost immediately, because the only thing is standard in guitar playing, manufacturing, and designing and creating is that nothing's really standard. All the rules are there to be broken by somebody. So I'm gonna get the longest one. So that's gonna get tricky. I do have enough guitar stands, I just don't have it close enough. Am I still sending audio? Hello? Yes. Cool. So this is what we consider, what we call a super strat. Stratocaster is a copyrighted brand by Fender Guitar Company. But because of the manufacturing system that Fender guitars had, more alike of a Ford car, assembled on an assembly line, more than handcrafted by a skilled worksman or woodworking man, allow them to be mix and match and modify aftermarket. Once after purchased, most of the parts you could either interchange or just flat out replace for something very easy to fit to it. And how so? What is the big difference? What makes them so modular? This little baby here, the bolt-on heel system. Basically, neck is one type, well, in this case, 3 types of wood, fretboard, and 3 stripes, technically of the same wood, but obviously with different grains, different grain directions for extra strength, right? The wood is made of a completely different type, technically, in this case, completely different type of wood, species included, and they're just bolted together. These 4 screws bolt both parts very, very tightly together, meaning that just with a screwdriver, I can detach the whole neck system, and as long as the new part I replace it with has the same measurements of the gap left in the body, I can swap necks in 20 minutes, right? Also, the fact that most of the parts are basically screwed or bolt-on, basically power tools galore, make them very easy to modify and to customize and to make your own, instead of having to take whatever the manufacturer choose for you or the very little options they gave you back in the day. I'm talking 40s, 50s, 60s, because in the 60s the amount of options became already borderline silly, but obviously exploded again in the 80s. But that's another story for another show. Means that a lot of people decided to buy several units and take the parts they liked the most and assemble them together. Probably the most famous case that I hope you might be aware of is a guitar called Blackie, belonging to Mr. Eric Clapton. Blackie was built out of 5 Fender Stratocasters, I think. Or he bought 5, gave 2 away, and made Blackie out of the 3 remaining ones. As in, I think he took the neck from one of them, the body from another one of them, obviously. The electronics and the hardware kind of was a mismatch of the ones that were actually better suited and better working. And I think he had it repainted black. Don't quote me on the repainting part. I'm not too sure about that. Because when Eric Clapton came on a tour to the United States, on the year he basically landed in America, he learned that Fender Stratocasters had become kind of uncool because of quality issues. They changed the management, so the new manager was more concerned about profit than quality or reputation of the brand. So they were very easy to acquire, although they were not as brilliant or as wonderfully crafted as the previous decade ones. That's hence the fact that he was able to buy 5, bring them all back to England, give 2 away as gift. I think one of them, I'm going to shut up because I think one of them was Pete Townsend and the other one was George Harrison in the Beatles. But once again, the facts are escaping my brain at the moment. It's a little too late in this part of the globe. So, but once again, the example I was trying to put is, if you take a Fender length, say 649, from more or less here to, this is what we call a locking nut, because this is a floating tremolo system. Basically, it allows you to change the tension of the string. Not only you can change the pitch by making the string shorter, you also can change the whole tension of the string just by depressing the lever, which stretches a set of springs, which is what brings the whole system back into the original pitch. So, but the point is, this is the longest that is a standard compared to the Gibson, which is the shortest. And I get away far enough that you can see the big distance. Okay, I'm trying to get to the right between the bridge, not the tailpiece, the bridge of both guitars. So in this case, we're talking this much, which makes that even if you face the frets, even if you put just face on the frets, if I can put that in the camera and align them properly, okay, I cannot show you that there's a difference, but it's so minute and it's so hard to level them. Basically, the smaller frets down here are still bigger than the smaller frets down here. You might even be able to kind of compare. And that's why that's possibly the first decision that you need to make when choosing what type of guitar you're going to buy. But luckily, that decision is not going to be made by you or the clerk on the shop. It's going to be made by your hand. Once you put your hand on the neck and try to play whatever you know to play already, even if it's just one scale exercise, the guitar is going to tell you back, I like you, or no, we're not made for each other. Hence the fact that in Guitar Center you find walls of options. I almost banged my second camera. 1 second. On top of everything, it's unusually hot this first week of August here in UK. So, sorry about that. So that is kind of your first choice. It's how comfortable is the guitar going to be towards me? Because, as I said, it's kind of that very extreme, from almost unplayable to too easy to play. Yeah, there's such a thing of a guitar is too easy to play. Another long explanation for another time. But for what we care here, for Synth-Tars, for playing synth with your guitar, for the extension, second factor is, are you skilled enough to be able, if necessary, if you so choose, after the previous show we did two or three shows ago about the options that you actually have to start playing Synth-Tar. Sorry. If you're skilled enough to attach whatever attachment you might need in order to make the electromechanic part of the guitar become, in this day and age, MIDI digitally controlling your synth voice, whatever synthesizer you choose to trigger. If the answer is no, you need to go for the few, although very decent and very honorable and fairly nice, obviously price accordingly, very nice one-stop systems, as in that attachment that you require, i.e. divided pickup, let's stop it at there, the registering system, the mechanism that is going to transform vibration into MIDI is already installed. It comes pre-built in the body of the guitar, and usually with very comfortable and very easy to use controls, already attached, professionally fitted, no fuss, no fuss, no fuss. So just plug it and use it. If you're skilled enough, or you think is skilled enough, and trust me, it requires almost no skill. It's just be able to take decisions more than being actually skilled with your hands. Although some woodwork knowledge also usually helps, but not really necessary. And you want to save a significant amount of money, then you can buy the guitar separate, buy the transducer, the pickup system, conversion, whatever, and then just put them together. Not only for the fact that that has seemed to be the most popular system available nowadays, as in the history of synth guitar started with all-in-one pieces, guitars with all the transducer system inbuilt, attached and triggering an external unit tether with a very specific, almost one-off type of lead or cable or connector. But that proved cumbersome and unpopular amongst guitar players because we already established guitar, because it's such a physical and such an exhaustive instrument that is asking a lot of hand exercise constantly, obviously proportional to the style you want to play and or your role, because you could be a rhythm guitar and just changing 5 chords through the night, but you still are doing 5 chords on every song every night. Still takes its toll, but it's still magnitudes away than having to be the lead and the melody maker and the synth playing. So it's a lot of, that's how I call it. There, make a meme out of that. So becomes a very particular, very personal unit, device, entity, item, right? So the fact that somebody else chose, and on top of everything, kind of poorly, what guitar you must play in order to play synthesizers, never sat really well on the guitar community. So the technology started taking off when brands like Roland, Yamaha, I don't think Casio ever released a attachment pickup, but their guitars were a little more guitar player friendly than the Roland ones, for instance. But these 3 brands and probably other brands decided that, okay, since the only thing that the Synth-Tar needs is the conversion unit, is the transducer, why don't we design a transducer that everybody can attach to whatever guitar they love, and they already have. They don't have to buy an extra guitar. They don't have to ruin, especially whatever guitar they choose to attach the transducer. Although later they develop solutions to not ruin at all, at least not irreversibly, whatever guitar you decide to attach it. Then is when double the amount of people decide, okay, I'm gonna try this, because now I can put it on the guitar I'm already used to. I already have set up properly. The problem with the attachable transducers is another big factor that you have to put under account whenever buying a guitar, if you will attach the transducer to it, is space. The final frontier. Okay? For instance, this type of design. Okay. Just a little, let me clarify something. I modified this guitar. Okay? This bridge is not the original design. The original design was half the width, was thinner. So the gap here between the pickup ring and the bridge was bigger. Okay? Also, the type of bridge design makes that the string body spacement, this gap here, is good enough. It's pretty good to fit almost anything. Okay? So not this one because it's modified, but the original model with the original bridge would have been fairly easy to attach the special pickup, like in this guitar, the new transducer, like in this one. Although this is a different design of bridge, the space bridge to pickup was the same in the other guitar. So you can see there's a decent amount of room between bridge and pickup to fit the extra pickup you're attaching. All right, so not a big deal, fairly easy. In this case, 2 screws with 2 springs that come provided with the pickup. The pickup comes with all sorts of leveling strips to make the pickup higher, or you can go for the screw in with a spring system, or for this type of 2 big posts holding the bridge style of bridges. Although this is a wraparound, it's kind of not really what it's designed for. They also give you a metal attachment that would make the pickup float just attached to the bridge. Okay, they give you tons of options by now in 2024 because they've gone through all the complaints of all the users. Oh, but because users would find themselves in this other case. You put a lot of money on a locking, floating tremolo system, very precise, very delicate, that leaves you virtually no space for anything in between. What are you going to do? Sacrifice your lead solo bridge pickup, remove that so you can put the hexaphonic MIDI, the hexaphonic to convert to MIDI? Not likely. Even more on a super strat that they're usually highly specialized for shredders, very tight specs, very fast necks, blah, 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 kind of pricey. So not likely you're gonna give away your beloved precious bridge pickup just to have MIDI. So if this is your only guitar, MIDI is off the window basically. So that's another factor you need to put in account before buying a guitar that you're gonna retrofit with an aftermarket pickup. Is, will it fit? Do I have enough room? Because even in this type of guitar, 2 humbuckers, bar bridge with originally enough clearance, the placement of the pickup ring and the type of pickup you're using varies from guitar to guitar, from brand to brand, from model to model, from year to year. So I've seen with this same design guitars with a pickup here or with a pickup here. 1 centimeter up or down makes a little bit of tone difference, makes very little static difference, but makes a whole of a difference if you need to fit a new pickup in between. 1 millimeter could be the decisive measurement to decide if you're going to have a hexaphonic pickup added to your guitar or not. So that to me is kind of the crucial bit of it. And I'm gonna say that that's a show. Let me just put my thoughts together. Obviously, aspects on the guitar, it's pickups. Pickups, they don't decide, but they tilt towards a specific timbre, the sound of the non-synthesizer side of your guitar. Either if you buy it with the inbuilt pickup, with the inbuilt divided pickup, or MIDI transducer, or not, you still are able. And for in the case of the GK3, which is the one I have attached, it's gonna pop. I don't know, because I can't hear my own sound. So you're still able and encouraged to use your non-divided magnetic pickups mixed together with your divided magnetic hexaphonic pickup. Therefore, you're sending magnetic to your MIDI, to your magnetic to MIDI converter, and magnetic audio to whatever unit, amplifier, processor, combined unit like the one I have, GR55 from Roland, that can process both types of signals, divided and transform it into MIDI, and non-divided and use it as a traditional electric solid body guitar would be used. So you get an extra source, what in keyboard terms would be extra multitimbrality, because you get whatever multitimbrality the divided will give you, thanks to, since it's split, divided in 6 pickups. Well, not really divided in 6 pickups. Actually, they mounted 6 individual independent pickups. It's not that they took one and they chopped it off. No, they basically made this thing the size of a string, and they put 6 of them here. It's a stupid nuance, but it's a fact to be understood, that is worth mentioning, to be taken care. So, thanks to you having 6 pickups, units like GR55, I think GR30, GR33, and the new ones, the SY 1, 200, 300, 1000, and the new GM 800, they give you string multitimbrality, as long as you use a divided pickup. Means that you can assign either a different patch per string, or even a different MIDI channel per string. So you would have 7 different MIDI channels triggering either one multitimbral synth module or 6 individual monophonic analog synthesizers, 1 per string. Why would you do that? Only you know, because you can, and I think you should. It's there. Bloody use it, all right? That's what the whole point. That's when art and new music and things that are really interesting are created, where you do things because they're there. Just use them and push the boundaries and find that, I don't know, a bass guitar, an organ, a vocal choir, a flute, a clarinet, and a synth CS80 brass do wonders when they play a chord together. It's up to you. It's your creativity. That's the only limit. Tech, not so much, not lately. Although the systems have another limitations that will take upon and explain and expose on a later show. Amazing. I managed to make a whole show on my own, just gesticulating about guitars. There you go. Please, if you have learned anything, or if you think everything I said was utterly nonsense, let me know. Write me a letter. Just sign me down. Give me a thumbs up, thumbs down. Whatever you feel like. I need to learn too, so I'm not perfect. I don't know everything. Although I claim to, but I don't know. So, and I would be totally happy to answer any questions about these subjects or any related subjects, or anything of what I said I didn't explain deep enough, you think, and I will agree, I haven't explained anything deep enough, or it gets confusing to you, it doesn't make sense to you. Let me know, write me a message, give me a little interaction. And remember the other shows that we're gonna have this weekend. You probably already watched, but we just came after Pro Synth Network. Shout out to Mr. Piericelli and company. Tomorrow afternoon, around 2-ish, we have Rancy in Synth-Geekery. I expect, I don't know for sure, Mr. Synchrotron will have his weekly ambient jam in the morning. Very advisable, very recommendable. And from then on, possibly Saturday night, either Ken's Pop or JX3D Senior Synth Stream, which they're also very interesting. And don't forget to check Mr. Synth-Tarists channel and check all about all those vintage, wonderful computers that we keep dearly in the middle of our hearts, because he does a sterling job doing his field reporter jobs with his gimbal and his tech and all the shenanigans. Thank you very much. All of you, take care. Sadly, this week we don't have any music to close and to play you out. So it's gonna be just a very sharp chop off. Avi and Frost, happy to be here and waiting your feedback. Take care.